good morning, and welcome to It's Not Just Magic. I'm your host, Cassie Clayton, and I am so excited because today we have Wendy Babcock with us today. Wendy, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Wendy, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us what you do. Tell us about Slam.
Well, let's see. Start with a little bit about me. As excuse me, I have a lot of titles. I always say I'm a collector of titles. I'm an international and TEDx speaker, author, podcast host, founder of the Kindness Bucket Brigade, and CEO of Slam Networking. So that's kind of in a nutshell some of the things I do. I'm trying to kind of reel it in. By the way, when you do a lot of things, you have to kind of reel it in a little bit. So really, I'm focused now on speaking and then Slam Networking. So.
Very cool.
Do you want me to talk about what Slam Networking is?
Tell us a little bit about the Slam Networking, for sure.
So Slam Networking is a different kind of networking. It's that hour of time each week that I help women schedule to have fun. And in that, we're having fun, we're connecting, and it's kind of a side of business then. Because normal networking, like traditional networking, you do your 1 minute pitch, everyone has their little spiel they give, maybe there's a speaker. Excuse me. This is different. This is a very relaxed kind of, kick your shoes off type of feeling. Because I truly feel like we get to know one another better when we're having fun together. And so we do things like we play bingo, we have Wheel of Fortune, we have a virtual dance party, and then I have a speaker showcase where we do invite members and non-members to come in and give a 20-minute presentation, in their zone of genius.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's really cool. And I've been to a couple of your networking events before. And it is really cool because you do focus on just kind of the human aspect of everything versus just kind of we show up and it's a sales pitch and everybody's just giving their pitches, which there's value there. I mean, we're at a networking event. You need to know what people do.
Yes.
If you're going to be able to help each other succeed.
Right.
So, but yeah, it definitely brings in just a different kind of aspect.
And what I found too is I find if maybe it's just me and I kind of feel bad for saying this out loud then if it is just me, but when I'm in a big network setting, like virtual, mostly virtual, that's where the world's gone. And everyone's kind of going around giving their 1 minute pitch. I'm in my head thinking about kind of memorizing what I'm going to say. And so I'm not really paying that much attention to everybody else like I should be. So they're giving all their, beautiful, pitches that they've really got down pat. And I'm in my mind, almost panicking, okay, what if I don't know what I'm going to say? Should I switch it up? Should I do this? So I try and take that kind of panic feeling away.
That is... And I go through the same experience as well because I'm always oh shoot, I gotta talk soon. Oh no! And then once I get up and I do speak, I'm like, oh, that didn't sound so great.
Right.
And then when I sit back down, it's then I'm in my head about the fact that, oh shoot,
I didn't say this or that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely hear you. So let's talk about, because Slam Networking, that's your passion, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what was it that made you know that it was time to step into your passion?
So for me, Slam Networking was actually born out of the pandemic. I call it my pandemic baby. Before the pandemic, I was speaking on stages and kind of doing other things in person. And during the pandemic, what happened was everything went virtual. And as a speaker, I was very hesitant to do virtual speaking engagements because I like to interact with the audience. I like to engage a lot. And I just thought it was really hard to do that virtually. Mm-hmm. And so I really kind of put all of that on the back burner between speaking and even networking. And then I started to network virtually. And it just felt superficial. You can only get to know somebody so much through virtual networking. It's very kind of sometimes one-sided, but basic information, where you live, what's the weather, whatever. And I just felt really deflated about it.
Right.
And when I started, I don't know when I came up with the idea, I just thought something has to change with my networking. And I thought, I'm just going to ask kind of crazy questions. I'm going to start asking icebreaker questions just to kind of break up the monotony. And that's when it kind of clicked. When people would get excited to answer the questions, like, oh, this is different. Like, this is fun. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's something to this. Like, people want to talk about fun stuff. They don't want to just talk about the weather, where they live, just about their business or yours, whatever. And I think that's when it really clicked in the beginning of the pandemic, like, or I shouldn't say beginning, probably maybe halfway through 2020. And I just was like, there's something to this. Like, I'm going to run with this and see where this goes. And that's kind of like when I felt kind of like awakened, I guess I would call it, you know, because I was feeling really down. There was a lot of things that happened with the pandemic. My mom passed away in the beginning. And so like to find something I could kind of grab onto and run with at that point was just like, you know, like, so curtains opened up and angels sang, you know, just like, this is my thing. I love this.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I feel like the pandemic kind of was that way for kind of a number of people. It's like all of a sudden we all found ourselves on different paths than maybe we originally had thought was going to be our path.
Exactly.
Because we don't, you know, we don't really, like, nobody expected it. Like year and a half of like at home all the time.
Yeah, and everything had to change because everything went virtual. And for somebody who was doing speaking engagements, all of my big engagements basically canceled. Some went virtual, but the big ones, all, like I had one at Lambeau Field I was supposed to speak at, which I was super excited about, and they ended up canceling it. They did a couple like smaller like virtual lunch and learn things that they had me speak at, but you know, you kind of miss out on all of that stuff that I was doing pre-pandemic, which was more my passion. You know, so switching gears, you know, I went through this definite phase of kind of like, like this sucks.
So what advice would you, because not just with the pandemic, but with like a lot of different situations, we find ourselves all the time in our business having to make pivots where you get to that space and you think that, oh man, this is where I'm going. And then you're like, oh, I need to take a completely different road here. So what advice would you give to people when they find themselves in that space?
Interestingly, so I was able to speak with Mel Robbins at an event, and I was in that place where I was explaining to her that I had like crazy like squirrel brain, and I have all these things, and like I don't know what thing to run with. And you're kind of at that point where you know you want to shift, but you don't know what direction you want to go in. And Mel Robbins basically told me, you got to kill the squirrels. You have to get rid of all of those crazy ideas and figure out what's the one thing that really kind of lights you up. What's that thing that you want to do that makes the most sense? It's going to, obviously we need to make money. And I know my gears were just like screeching halt with all the squirrels. And like, after that is when I really focused on the slam networking, because I was kind of off still trying to get speaking gigs and do all this other stuff. And excuse me. And I was in that space where I knew something had to change, but I just didn't know where to go with it. And so, yeah, just kind of trying to quiet down all of those, like whatever you want to call it, crazy ideas, the crazy squirrel brain. And so I had made out like a whiteboard of all the things that I was doing. And, you know, I would write down, like, is this just like basically a time sucker? Do I find any joy in this anymore? You know, why am I doing this? And I had to kind of sit down and write out, I'm doing, you know, I had 2 podcasts running at the time. My slam networking, speaking engagements. I had a Profit Up Summit I was running, plus another like online course I was doing. And I'm like, okay, there's so much, which direction do I go? Because none of it was really cohesive. None of it really went together. They're all kind of separate entities. And when Mel gave me that advice, I'm like, okay, something's got to give. I need to pick what lane I need to be in right now and stick with that. And I think that's the advice I would give somebody is, you know, when you talk about your passion, find which thing it is that you really want to stick with long term. And you know, don't confuse yourself or the people around you with what you're doing.
Right. I think that that's so important too, because like you, I wear a lot of different hats, and so
Yeah.
somebody was actually asking me the other day, like, how do they all tie in together? And it's um like for me with mine, it's
Mhm.
like I kind of do feel like they all sort of
Mesh. Yeah.
mesh into one lane,
Right.
because I have the branding, I have the website business, and that allows me to help and like work with light workers, the
Right.
people who I define as the people bringing light into the world. And so those are the people I want to be working with, so that, and that really lights me up, that it lights my passion around it. And so I'm helping the people that I want to help, doing the skills that I enjoy doing. And then like like we do have two, like I do also have two different podcasts going, and they are but they both feed into each other and still feed into the same thing that I'm doing. So it's
Right.
like, it's kind of like, if they all kind of have an underlining theme and a thing where it's like they're all working to the same thing, then, but otherwise you are dealing with such very different entities.
Yeah.
So and our gardener decided that right now is the great time to blow the leaves, so
That's how it
apologize for
goes.
any extra noise that is happening because of that. So
No problem.
but yeah, so go ahead and tell us, what is one thing or story that had the most profound impact on you and your business?
I go right to 2019. I held this women's event. It was a 3-day event. It was the first event I threw, and I basically tackled it all myself because I thought I have to control all the pieces. I can't afford to pay people. I just need to like do it all myself. And while the event itself, I brought in 8 speakers. It really was like one of my best memories. Like it was, so this is where the conundrum is. It was like the best event I had, and it was so great, but it sunk me $4,000 in the hole at the end of the day. And had I hired the people that I needed to help me market the event, help me run the event, and do all the things instead of doing it all myself, I truly think it would have been a lot more successful. I would have probably sold more tickets, and we still had a good group. We still had, I think, like 55 or 60 women there, which was great. But because I tried to do all the things, I was just exhausted by day 3. Day 3, we had, I think, three speakers. I couldn't tell you what they said, to be honest. I was just so just emotionally and mentally done again. And I think that was one of the biggest lessons I learned. So the next event I held, it was virtual during the pandemic. I hired someone to do the marketing. I hired someone to do the tech. Best event. I was like, okay, the investment is worth it to hire that person or the team that you need. I was so hesitant to do that. I'm like, I can do it myself. I can do it myself. And what a lesson to be end of day and have to tell my husband, I need to get a loan to pay for all the crap that I started, and I don't have the money to, finish paying for the food bill and all that because I overdid it. So that was like, this huge high from, it was like really successful event as far as like the content and what everyone got out of it. But the financial part of it sunk me. I was so depressed after that event because of the financial aspect of it. Huge lesson. And I learned a lot from that.
And I think that again, that's so important, because there are so many times that we do try to do it all.
Yeah.
And we don't look and see the value of allowing other people to help us along
Yeah.
the way. We actually just have I'll give you an example on our end. We've got there's a group that I'm involved in, Meek Life Motivation, and we
Oh
help
yeah.
one of the women in the group. She has an event that's coming up, and so we all kind of like pitched in together to help her put her event on and take it all online. And
Wow.
when we were able to do, like, with the whole of us able to help her, it took us maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah, it
To
makes a
get
huge
her up,
difference.
to get it promoted, to get it out in the group, to get it like to where people can now register and sign up for this, and it was promoted.
Wow.
Like, you know, and so now we're talking about further things with her of like what's going to be next for your group, what's going to be next for
Yeah.
your group. And so we're like, okay, I've got this part, this person has this part, we're gonna bring this like to a place of absolute success.
Yeah.
In this case, we're kind of like, whether you wanted the help or not, you're getting it.
Yes.
But that's kind of the wonderful thing about Mink Life is that we are there to help and support each other. But like the cool part is that when one person wins, we all win.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And when you, if there's I was even talking to somebody, and I'm making some, you know, I'm talking to some people about coming in and having certain talk, like helping me do certain talks and things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the things that people keep saying, oh, well, you can do that. Like you've got that. Like you don't need like this extra person's help. And I'm like, I know where my strengths lie.
Right.
And I know that this person can literally take this topic and run with it.
Yes.
Whereas I could, and after lots of practice, I might be at a reasonable level. They're already at the level of blowing it out of the park.
Yeah. And that's what's so important. Yeah.
So it's more beneficial for me to request for their help and have make it a joint thing than it is for me to try to get to their level of genius in doing it.
No, 100% agree. And that's what I had to learn that too. And I think I spoke for Monica's group, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the Mink Life, for the Australia, LA, and did I do the London one? But yeah, so yeah, that it was such a well-run event. Like it just was like a machine. It worked really well. So you could tell there were people behind the scenes doing those different pieces, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, when it shows, when you do something and you have the correct people in place to do it, you know, when I had my summit and I had the correct people in place to do the marketing, to run the AV stuff, and I had people comment afterwards like, that's the best summit I've been to in a long time. Everything ran so smooth. Like I hired the right guy, you know, and it's so important. You think, oh, I can't afford it, but you know what? I learned about sponsorships. I learned about, you know, having people help and or donate their time. So
Yeah.
that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. And a lot of the times I think when you're so share your thoughts on this, because I think a lot of the times, especially when you're starting out, you can help, like you can have kind of trade a little bit for services.
Yes.
But I do think that there's a point that when you get further down the line, it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree. There's definitely a point like when you're, like you said, when you're starting out, collaborations are great. Even down the line, collaborations are always great, but there's a point too where you have to know your value for what you're doing and what the other person is doing, and there has to be payment or, you know, an equal swap of goods or however or services that you're going to do. And I have found that with people where in networking, which is great. That's why I love networking too, is because you can find people. And for me, I like to be a connector. I like to align people, you know, to connect them. But there's been times where I've met people and it just is like, we need to collaborate on something, you know, and whether that's me saying, okay, I want to bring you into my network, you know, and your membership's free, and then you bring me in yours and my membership's free with yours. So like, there's definitely, you can do trades and collaborations, but there is a point, you know, when you're going to hire that marketer or, you know, the AV person where you need to shell out some dough, you know, because they're doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what advice would you share for people who are wanting to develop, like start their business and develop it?
To start it and develop it. I think the hardest advice, even for myself, is to get feedback from people who have done it before you. You know, find those people that you really look up to that are doing what it is you are aspiring to do. And, you know, ask questions. How did you get there? You know, what did you do? What systems did you put in place? And then listen to the feedback. Sometimes it's hard for us because we think, you know, this is our baby. We don't want to get that feedback if someone says, well, your website needs some work. And then we get kind of really butthurt and offended because maybe we built it, you know, and you're like, they don't know what they're talking. But really just listening to that feedback, asking questions, follow the people who have already done it. And you know, you don't have to recreate the wheel. You know, obviously put in your own. I'm a big person about not just, how do I say this? I've seen people just basically rip off ideas and it drives me kind of crazy. So it's like, don't reinvent the wheel, but also put in your own personality into something. Make it your own. Don't just, you know, copy and paste someone else's thing because it works. You have to interject you into whatever it is you're doing. And I think that's how your business builds, because people buy you more than like the business. You know what I mean? So like, you know, there's lots of networking groups out there and people are either going to align with me or somebody else or both of them. But it comes down to who's running that business and who do you align with the best. So if you put your personality out there, who you are, you're going to attract the people to you because it's you, not what you've copied and pasted from something else.
Absolutely. And yeah. So making sure that it has your own voice to it.
Yes.
100%. I also like the fact that you brought up that it's knowing your value.
Yeah.
That and understanding the value that you bring, because I do feel like there are so many entrepreneurs when they start, they don't understand the value that they bring. And knowing your self-worth, because you will have people along the line who will tell you that your value is not where that you are not worth what you are charging, or that you are charging more than what you are worth. And you have to know at the bottom of your soul that what you have said, that you had, like for me, like I do help people with their websites. So I had to go do the research, figure out what is the industry standard, what's the range, am I overcharging people, am I like by the standard that is set for the business.
Right.
And so once I kind of did that research, I was like, I know absolutely that my pricing is perfectly fair.
Right.
Well, when somebody comes to me and says, no, it's not, it's like you know, in general, it's do your research, see what other people are charging, see what other people are doing. So that way, you know that when you put you and yourself out there, that what you are giving is, nope, this is my value, this is my standard. And then you just don't budge from there, because somebody coming in and telling you that you're not worth what you say you are, just means that they're not your client.
And that's exactly it. You know, and that goes for the speaking business too. When speakers start out, like, you know, especially I'm not talking about a speaker who's going to give an offer at the end of a presentation, but someone who's paid to speak. And that's how I started out, was being paid to speak, you know, going to associations, corporations and talking. It was hard to charge. Like, what do I charge to start out? Because I didn't have a whole lot of experience. I gave like probably 20 like free presentations, but now I'm ready to charge. What do I start with? And I think my first gig was like $500. I'm like, oh God, no one's going to pay me $500 to speak. Sure enough, they did. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go for $750. And so what I did was I slowly like baby stepped up my price, and I knew like when I got to a place where I was uncomfortable asking for that, not that I wasn't worth it, I found that I wasn't attracting the people that were going to pay it, if that makes sense. So like, I remember I got to like $1,250 to charge. And I'm like, okay, my mentor at the time was like, you should be charging at least $2,700 to get on a stage. I'm like, I am just not comfortable. Like, and I felt it in my bones. Like, I didn't feel like I had enough experience at that point yet. Like you said, industry standards, like what's everyone else at this, you know, level. But because my presentation was associated with a celebrity, because he had trained me, he thought you need to be getting this much. I'm like, I still don't have as much experience as I need under my belt to charge it. And I there was a lull. in booking when I raised my price. I brought it back down to that $12.50, and boom, right away I was getting gigs, and then over the years I get more than that now, but it's just a matter of being comfortable with it and knowing your worth. Like when I got to that point where I was charging over $2,700 for a gig, I'm like, no, I definitely, am worth this much money, and I can feel it. Like, oh yeah, I can say, this is what I charge, and I don't have any qualms about, yeah, I'm worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah. And I feel like that's an extremely important, just, it's an extremely important point of saying, of knowing your worth.
Yeah.
What would be your advice to somebody if they came to you and said, "Hey, Wendy, I was talking to this this is what I'm charging, and this person over here said that my prices weren't worth it." What would you tell them?
I would ask them, how do they feel about their prices? So I had this conversation with my daughter. I have an adult daughter who started a business, and she makes these beautiful canvas paintings that she was hesitant to sell because she didn't, she's like, well, I don't know what they're worth. I'm like, well, what would you be like if somebody gave you $100 right now for that painting? How does it make you feel? She's like, I'm like, well, what's that? Do you feel like it's not enough? She's like, yeah, kind of. I'm like, okay, that's a jumping off point. Now, raise it. Where is it that point? You're going to find that spot. So regardless of what somebody else says, it's about you and your worth. How do you feel like when someone says, I want to pay you $1,000 for that painting? In fact, at Polka Dot Celebration, someone told her that they would easily pay, what was the amount? Like over $2,000 for one of her paintings. And our eyes got this big. They saw her worth. Mm-hmm. And she wasn't at that point yet. But when somebody says you're not worth what you're charging, I have such an issue with that because they don't know you. And, I just don't feel like it's not fair to tell someone they're not worth what they're asking. I never feel like it's like, no, you're not willing to pay what I'm worth is what it comes down to.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was kind of a long roundabout way to answer your question. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I love it. So if there's one piece of advice that you could, we're kind of getting to the last few minutes of the show. So what's the one piece of advice that you could, that we haven't covered yet that you would give to all the entrepreneurs out there?
Network, but don't network necessarily to increase your network, but to connect the people in your network. It's kind of I guess I could expand a little bit, but like if you become the connector, people remember that. So when you network, don't do it for your own gain. You do it to say, oh my gosh, I met Cassie. You're going to love her personality, and I'm going to connect you with this person because, and tell them why. Mm-hmm. And they're going to remember that because the people who have connected me with people who I really aligned with, I remember that. I'm like, oh my God, that person really knows me. They know who I'm looking for. And they made that connection, and I'm so thankful. And I'm going to do that in return. Yeah,
absolutely. So, tell everybody where they can find you.
Okay, so with Slam Networking, if you want to find out more on Slam Networking, you can go to slamhappyhour.com. Or if you want to find out more about me, you can go to wendynetworks.com. And I'm all over Facebook and TikTok. So if you just search my name, you'll find me.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Thank you.
Very cool. And just to kind of close out the show, I'm Cassie, and you can find me at Stargazers Unite, stargazersunite.com, all the places. Wendy, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your knowledge, your expertise. Thank you for sharing your genius with my audience, and I look forward to having you back sometime.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.